The story begins with a blonde girl smiling gently as she introduces herself to the person in front of her, saying her name is Dandelion. Then the two shake hands and express their surprise at how quickly they got along, with the man commenting that the modern era is wonderful and perfect for such encounters. Dandelion smiles again and excitedly announces the start of what seems to be a competition or a battle. The atmosphere intensifies, and the tension between them becomes obvious as their hands are shown pressing firmly in preparation for combat. Dandelion dashes toward her opponent at lightning speed in a surprise attack. In another scene, far from the previous conflict, a delivery worker appears. He is a man named Fuyo Shigaraki, riding a bicycle and looking exhausted from a long day at work. Fuyo arrives at the customer's door, rings the bell, and presents the order he's carrying, saying this is their delivery. The customer replies with confusion, looking at the contents, and insisting it's not what they ordered. Fuyo tries to explain that the order was correctly registered in the app and suggests the customer contact the store directly to resolve the issue. However, the customer, visibly angry, grabs Fuyo roughly and demands a refund, which flusters and frightens Fuyo. This causes him to drop the order from his hands. Fuyo panics and quickly tries to catch the order before it hits the ground and breaks, causing him to injure himself in the process. In another scene, a girl named Haruka appears in a restaurant called Mama, looking anxiously at her father Fuyo. She notices a wound on his face and asks him with concern what happened. Fuyo tries to lighten the mood and jokingly says he tripped due to clumsiness. She warns him not to overwork himself, reminding him that he's already 42 years old. Fuyo tries to ease the tension, saying he's already worried about the gray hairs and wrinkles showing up, and there's no need to remind him again, making Haruka laugh. While they sit in the restaurant, Fuyo notices a couple nearby and feels a twinge of sorrow or regret. He quietly wonders if a family restaurant is really a good place to go out, especially since he hasn't taken Haruka anywhere in a long time, and he could have chosen a better place. But Haruka expresses her happiness with the restaurant and tells her father she has many things she wants to talk to him about. Fuyo looks at her with love and inward pride, thinking to himself that his daughter truly is a good girl. Later, Haruka says goodbye to her father, thanking him for the meeting, and enters her apartment. He responds kindly, bidding her farewell. After Haruka goes inside, a woman comes out of the same apartment, Haruka's mother and Fuyo's ex-wife. She tells him she needs to talk to him for a bit. Haruka wishes her a good night and leaves them. The woman asks Fuyo if Haruka has mentioned anything about her future plans, and he replies that he hasn't heard anything from her about that. That's when the mother reveals that Haruka wants to attend an art university. Fuyo seems happy about the idea, affirming that Haruka has loved drawing for a long time. But the mother interrupts him and says there's another issue they need to discuss. Speaking with great seriousness and honesty, the woman tells Fuyo that they need money. When Fuyo asks how much, she explains there are exam fees and prep school expenses, and the approximate amount they'll need is 3 million yen. The scene ends with Fuyo riding his bike back home, deeply absorbed in thoughts about his daughter, wondering sadly if Haruka didn't tell him about her dream to go to university because she feared he would oppose it. The events begin with Fuyo sitting in the restaurant, thinking sadly after his meeting with his daughter Haruka, blaming himself. Even though he is separated from her mother, she is still his daughter, and she should have told him about her desire to enter university. Fuyo feels helpless and hopeless, overwhelmed by the large sum his daughter needs, 3 million yen, and admits he could never afford that amount. He feels sorrow and shame, considering himself a failed father. On his way back, Fuyo passes by a public park and notices a group of people gathered in a dark area catching his attention. He spots a blonde girl, Dandelion, who appeared earlier, facing 3 young men. It seems like a heated argument or confrontation. Fuyo hesitates, thinking it's none of his business and that he doesn't have the courage to step in. But suddenly the image of his daughter Haruka comes to mind. He remembers the resemblance between Dandelion and Haruka, which makes him reconsider. He listens to their conversation and hears Dandelion expressing frustration at facing 3 men. She tells them she hadn't heard there would be 3, suggesting this wasn't what she expected. One of the men mocks her and sarcastically asks if she's scared now that she's up against all 3. Dandelion responds with calm confidence, saying that 3 men aren't nearly enough to defeat her. Fuyo hesitates for a moment, then musters the courage to step into the scene. He stands nervously in front of the 3 men, trying to defend the girl, saying it's obvious she doesn't want any trouble with them, and asks them to back off. The men are surprised by the intervention of this older man, and react with strong sarcasm and mockery. Dandelion looks astonished by Fuyo's sudden and unexpected involvement. Fuyo feels like he's gotten himself into a big mess, and may have acted too impulsively. The men try to intimidate and push Fuyo away, telling him to leave because they're having an important conversation with the girl. One of them threatens him directly and asks if he's really looking to fight. Fuyo hesitates, clearly nervous, but then suddenly decides to accept the challenge and tells them he's ready to fight if that's what they want. Dandelion looks stunned, not expecting such a response from a passing stranger. The man who challenged him laughs mockingly and ridicules the idea that an old man like Fuyo would fight them, calling it completely ridiculous. He sarcastically asks if Fuyo has ever been in a fight before. Fuyo calmly admits that he has never fought anyone in his life. Dandelion secretly thinks Fuyo is hopeless, and that his stance is pointless. The 3 men continue to mock Fuyo. One of them, clearly excited for a fight, laughs and says this will be Fuyo's first real fight. He lunges at Fuyo quickly, aiming to attack. But shockingly and unexpectedly, Fuyo counters him with a powerful punch to the stomach, sending him flying backward in a stunning moment. Dandelion is visibly thrilled and amazed by Fuyo's surprising strength, while the other 2 men are clearly shaken. The attacker collapses on the ground in pain, stunned by what just happened. Everyone is left in silent shock and awe at what Fuyo has done, as if he had been hiding a tremendous power that even he himself didn't know existed. After Fuyo landed a powerful blow on one of the three young men, knocking him to the ground, the second guy attacked him in rage, shouting in his face and demanding to know what he was doing. But Fuyo easily dodged the attack and delivered a decisive strike, causing the second man to fall to the ground as well, clearly in pain. At that moment, the third young man lunged at Fuyo in anger, yelling at him not to underestimate him, throwing a powerful punch. But Fuyo looked at him calmly and steadily without moving. The young man was stunned when he realized that Fuyo had suddenly disappeared, wondering where he had gone. Meanwhile, Dandelion was watching the scene with wide-eyed amazement, unable to believe what was unfolding before her. Fuyo reappeared suddenly in front of the third man, grabbed him firmly, and launched a rapid attack, astonishing Dandelion, who commented in awe on the attack technique Fuyo had just used. The third young man collapsed painfully to the ground, then tried to beg Fuyo for mercy, pleading with him to stop. But Fuyo halted at the last moment before landing a finishing punch, hesitating and settling for just a warning. After the confrontation ended, Fuyo looked at his hand and sarcastically wondered if he should have hit the guy even harder if it had been a real fight. But the guy, now terrified, quickly denied that it was a real fight and fled the scene in fear of Fuyo. At that moment, Dandelion approached Fuyo and told him he had tricked her about never having fought before, which made Fuyo step back nervously and insist that he really hadn't fought before. Curious, Dandelion asked him if he was one of those old gang leaders who used to fight for turf control. Fuyo responded with a mix of surprise and sarcasm, asking how old she thought he was. He admitted to her that this really was his first fight, but explained that what he had said earlier only applied to street fights. Back in his youth, he had actually trained in mixed martial arts, MMA. But Dandelion dismissed his explanation, simply saying it didn't matter now. Then she smiled and stepped closer, saying she should thank him for helping her in the fight. Fuyo humbly declined, saying he didn't do it for praise. At that, Dandelion suddenly reached out her hand and asked him to give her 50,000 yen, surprising Fuyo and making him question what she was talking about. Fuyo tried to clarify in confusion, asking why he should pay her instead of the other way around. Dandelion laughed and explained that he misunderstood the situation. She clarified that she was originally supposed to fight those guys, and the winner would receive 50,000 yen as a reward. Dandelion then showed Fuyo an image on her phone, revealing that someone pays money to watch fight videos, which made Fuyo wonder with curiosity and confusion. Could fighting really become a source of income? Dandelion looked at him with a confident smile, noticing his interest in the idea, and told him she could lend him 150,000 yen, adding that she had something even more important she wanted to ask him about. She smiled at Fuyo and teasingly told him that, while he might think he helped her in that situation, she was pretty sure he actually enjoyed the fight he just had. Dandelion confidently told him that the signs of enjoyment were all over his face during the fight. She playfully asked if he was going through something painful and suggested that maybe the fight helped relieve some pressure and stress. Fuyo immediately recalled the recent altercation he had because of his job as a delivery worker, and he reacted strongly, denying it with clear embarrassment. He tried to quickly change the subject and distract her, but she obviously ignored his attempts. Dandelion looked at him seriously and told him she knew he wanted to earn money through fighting. She went on to explain that strong people could make a lot of money easily, and that 50 or even 100,000 yen was nothing to them. At that moment, Fuyo remembered his daughter Haruka and his desperate need for money to pay for her university tuition. He asked Dandelion very seriously if it was truly possible to earn money from fighting, and whether the amount could really reach hundreds of thousands of yen. Fuyo smiled awkwardly and admitted it was hard to believe, and Dandelion noticed the clear doubt and hesitation in his expression. She ignored his skepticism and told him she didn't really care, then turned around to leave. Fuyo urgently remembered his daughter Haruka, who wanted to enter an art university and whose tuition fees totaled around 3 million yen. So he called out to Dandelion loudly, asking her to wait a moment. He quickly walked up to her, pleading with her, to teach him how he could make money through fighting. Dandelion turned to him with a confident smile and a cunning look in her eyes. It was clear she had been expecting this request. She introduced Fuyo to an app called Kenkao and enthusiastically explained that it was a fighting platform that allowed people who wanted to fight to challenge each other under certain conditions. She explained that each fight on the app comes with prize money for the winner, and that the funds come from viewer subscriptions and advertisements supporting the live broadcasts of the fights. She excitedly said that this app was a blessing, especially for people like them who enjoy fighting. Fuyo hesitated for a moment, clearly feeling confused and uncertain in front of her. Dandelion seized on his hesitation, saying that this was exactly the point she had wanted him to understand, and that now it was time for a simple test. Fuyo asked in confusion what kind of test she meant, and Dandelion explained that to register on the Kenkao app, he needed a recommendation from her, so she had to test his abilities herself. She stepped back a bit and said she would assess whether he was truly suited for this kind of fighting or not, while Fuyo looked uneasy and hesitant about it. Dandelion turned to him calmly and told him she knew very well that he was skilled in mixed martial arts, implying that she had full confidence in his abilities. Dandelion continued speaking to Fuyo with a clear smile, confidently telling him that what he was trying to do was fight. She explained that fighting on the Kenkao app was completely different from traditional martial arts. It wasn't always one-on-one or face-to-face. It could take entirely different forms. She added a warning. If he wasn't strong enough in these kinds of fights, he would be defeated and badly beaten. Fuyo responded with clear determination, saying he fully understood the risk involved, and that from now on, he planned to study and train to become better. Dandelion then calmly told him she would show him something useful on her phone and asked him to pay close attention. Suddenly and without warning, she launched a powerful surprise attack on him. But Fuyo dodged it with impressive skill, surprising even Dandelion herself. He quickly stepped back, stunned that the fight had started so abruptly. Dandelion smiled more eagerly and rushed at him again, this time with even more speed and force, challenging him to block it now. This time, Fuyo managed to block her attack, but with great difficulty. Shocked by her extraordinary strength, Dandelion disappeared from his sight for a brief moment, which confused him greatly. She suddenly reappeared behind him and grabbed him tightly from behind. Feeling victorious, Dandelion confidently told him it was over. She explained that she was using a rear chokehold, and once applied correctly, he wouldn't be able to escape. Fuyo began to feel the lack of air and struggled hard to resist, while Dandelion seriously told him that what they were doing was fighting, and that surprise attacks were not cowardly in this kind of combat. She said she saw him as a kind person, and that's why she was going easy on him and not hurting him too badly, but warned that he might lose consciousness. Fuyo began to feel that if he passed out, he would certainly lose this confrontation. At that moment, he remembered his daughter Haruka and realized that if he lost this fight, he wouldn't be able to do anything to help her. Suddenly, Dandelion was surprised to feel Fuyo gripping her hands, trying with great effort to break free, though she was confident he wouldn't be able to. However, she was stunned when she felt him start to move despite his difficult situation. Fuyo suddenly began to run at full speed, and Dandelion was shocked by his sudden sprint, assuming he was low on oxygen and desperately trying to resist. Fuyo continued to run rapidly toward a barrier in the area, making Dandelion realize he was planning something dangerous. Panic set in as she realized he was charging toward a low metal rail that could seriously injure her if she didn't let go. At the last moment, Fuyo ducked low and passed under the rail forcefully, forcing Dandelion to release him quickly to avoid getting hurt. Fuyo came to a stop after passing under the barrier with great effort, gasping for air and struggling to catch his breath after the intense confrontation. After Fuyo stopped running and caught his breath, Dandelion sat on the ground looking at him with a mix of astonishment and a little fear. She asked him in disbelief if he was trying to kill her, and commented that he was more dangerous than she expected. Fuyo replied with a hesitant smile, saying he thought she would let go before they reached the barrier, but she didn't. Dandelion laughed and said it was a gamble. Then she calmly added that it was fine. Being dangerous is actually better for fighting. She excitedly declared that Fuyo had passed the test and that she would register him on the KenCow app. She then turned to tell Fuyo that he wouldn't be able to figure anything out on his own and promised to teach him a lot of different things from now on. She gently approached him, placed her hand on his face, and said she would guide him step by step, then asked if he agreed. Fuyo responded with great joy, affirming that he did and asking her to take care of him. Dandelion was slightly surprised by his overly enthusiastic reaction and wondered to herself if this man was truly serious. Despite a young woman getting close to him, he seemed completely unfazed. Internally, Dandelion admitted that Fuyo's combat skills were truly impressive and acknowledged that he would be useful to her in her upcoming fights. On the other hand, Fuyo was excited and highly motivated by this new challenge, vowing to give it his all and always aim to win. The story then shifts to a flashback from Fuyo's past, where he was walking with great enthusiasm before his first professional match, declaring with confidence that he would definitely win. But he was soon hit by powerful, painful blows from his opponent, and realized just how strong professionals were. The match ended in a draw, which left him deeply disappointed and doubting his abilities, even as those around him encouraged him and told him he did well. However, doctors later warned him that continuing to fight might cost him his eyesight and advised him to retire. Fuyo suddenly woke up in the present, realizing those memories had just been a dream. He told himself with sadness and tension that today would be his first real fight in 20 years. He returned to his daily routine, delivering food to a customer and leaving the order at the door as requested. While working, he remembered last night when Dandelion directly asked him about his profile to register on the KenCow app. But Fuyo, in complete innocence, replied that he was Fuyo Shigaraki, 42 years old, which made her sigh in exasperation and explained that she didn't mean his real name. Dandelion clarified that she meant his profile on the app. She then showed Fuyo some examples from the app, advising him to choose a fake and unique profile picture to attract attention and gain popularity. Dandelion then gave her own example, saying she used the name Dandelion as a blonde girl with long hair, dressed in a cute high school sailor uniform who loves pretty things, which guarantees her a lot of popularity on the app. Fuyo was astonished and told her that it wasn't real and that she wasn't a high school student. Then Dandelion smiled and asked him what name he was going to choose for himself. She stepped closer and showed him something on her phone, asking if he liked it. Fuyo hesitated for a moment, but she reassured him with a confident smile that it was an excellent choice and would make him popular on the app, which made him feel reassured and encouraged. After finishing work, Fuyo returned to the location again in the evening on his bicycle, and met Dandelion once more in the playground, where she was waiting for him with a confident smile. Fuyo greeted her with a tired smile, and Dandelion joked in return, saying he looked exhausted as usual. She then remarked that this was his special kind of charm. As they stood there, Dandelion pointed out that his opponent for today's fight would be arriving soon. Then, a voice called out mockingly from a distance, saying he couldn't believe the opponent was just an old man. A large, muscular man approached, casting a mocking glance at Fuyo and asking if he was really his opponent. Fuyo greeted him politely, while Dandelion looked at the man thoughtfully and said she felt like she had seen him somewhere before. She quickly recognized him and reacted strongly, warning Fuyo about how dangerous this opponent was and urging him to withdraw from the match. Dandelion then explained that the man was a real professional, a promising fighter from an MMA group called Hound Dogs, with a fight record of 5 matches, 4 of which he won by knockout. His name was Makimoto. Makimoto laughed and said he was pleased Dandelion knew him well, complimenting her on her extensive knowledge. Dandelion nervously looked at her phone and said the match would be one-on-one, no weapons allowed, as requested. Then commented with concern that these rules were in Makimoto's favor. She grew very worried and advised Fuyo to cancel the match immediately, saying the opponent was far too dangerous. But Fuyo calmly asked what would happen if he canceled the match at this point. Dandelion explained that canceling on the same day would harm his popularity and earnings, but it was understandable if he felt truly at risk. Still, Fuyo firmly decided to go through with it, shocking Dandelion, who tried to convince him how dangerous the situation was and that his opponent was a powerful pro. But Fuyo insisted on fighting, saying he desperately needed the money as soon as possible for his daughter Haruka. He added that this would be his first fight in 20 years, and he had been looking forward to it. Dandelion felt a mix of worry and surprise at his determination, but eventually relented, saying she understood his position. Before the fight began, Fuyo handed her his glasses, and she held them tightly, asking him only not to get seriously hurt. She then set up the camera and announced that she would be the host for the match, asking the 2 competitors if they were ready to begin. Fuyo responded with great confidence that he was ready, while Makimoto replied mockingly that he didn't need any preparation to fight an old man. The 2 fighters stood face to face, waiting for the match to start. Makimoto smiled wickedly and confidently, clearly certain of his victory in this fight, while Fuyo looked at him with a humble smile, visibly exhausted, but carrying a mix of confidence and slight nervousness since this was his first match in a long time. Then Dandelion raised her hand, officially announcing the start of the match between them. She remembered the night before, as she sat on the swing, when she curiously asked Fuyo if he had really been a professional in mixed martial arts, MMA. Fuyo smiled shyly and said he had been expecting that question. Dandelion told him she knew the sport well, but she had never heard the name Fuyo Shigaraki before. As Fuyo began calmly explaining his past to Dandelion, he told her that he had suffered an injury in his very first professional match, which forced him into early retirement. Dandelion asked if he had lost that match, but Fuyo clarified that, technically, the match had ended in a draw. Dandelion, gently swinging, commented regretfully that it was really unfortunate for him. After recalling the memory, Dandelion loudly announced the start of the match between Fuyo and Makimoto. She watched the 2 fighters closely and admitted to herself that this opponent was overwhelmingly strong. Even if it were another professional MMA fighter, the advantage would still go to Makimoto. Fuyo stood ready to fight, clearly nervous, knowing his record had no wins, only a draw and a long retirement. Meanwhile, Makimoto looked fully confident, standing tall with his record of 4 victories and 1 loss, still in his prime. Dandelion was extremely worried and thought Fuyo's only chance of winning was if Makimoto underestimated him and didn't take him seriously. Makimoto charged aggressively toward Fuyo, mocking him as an old man. As he lunged forward, he shouted provocatively, calling him an old geezer. Dandelion, observing the scene, noted that there might be a chance for a counterattack if Fuyo could dodge this first strike. Makimoto launched his first attack on Fuyo, thinking it was the perfect moment to finish him off. At that moment, intense focus and seriousness appeared on Fuyo's face as he prepared to avoid the blow. And indeed, Fuyo managed to block Makimoto's attack with a precise and clearly skilled defensive move. After defending against the strike, Fuyo stepped back steadily and quickly. Makimoto was shocked for a moment, wondering in surprise what kind of defensive move Fuyo had just used. He then quickly realized that his opponent wasn't just a beginner like he had assumed. Fuyo had obvious fighting experience. Determined after this realization, Makimoto decided he would not hold back at all and aimed to crush Fuyo with total precision and no mercy. As for Dandelion, she felt deeply disappointed upon realizing Fuyo's chance was gone, now that Makimoto had become much more cautious. At this point, she estimated Fuyo's chances of winning to be 0 because of how alert his opponent had become. She thought to herself, hoping at the very least that Fuyo wouldn't get seriously injured in the match. But then, Fuyo suddenly smiled in a strange way and said in a calm, confident voice that it was truly amazing. Makimoto was startled by Fuyo's odd reaction and didn't understand what was going on. Fuyo then continued in a clear and steady tone, explaining that the punch Makimoto had used was long and fast, and that he wouldn't have known its strength and effectiveness unless he had experienced it himself. Dandelion was stunned by Fuyo's state. He seemed mentally detached during the fight, and reminded him that he was still in the middle of a match. But in that moment, Fuyo began recalling the past, remembering how his life in the gym had been full of painful, difficult daily fights. He relived those memories, describing those harsh days filled with painful blows and intense struggles. Still, Fuyo admitted with a clear smile that, despite all the pain and hardship, those days were incredibly enjoyable for him. Dandelion was deeply shocked when she saw Fuyo's strange smile during the fight, and wondered with great confusion what could possibly make him smile in such a dangerous moment. Makimoto, clearly furious, demanded that Fuyo stop his rambling and nonsense. Then he lunged forward at high speed, yelling angrily at Fuyo to shut up. He began his attack with a feint punch, using his left hand aimed at Fuyo's face. Dandelion noticed from afar and shouted a warning that the punch was just a trap. The real strike was a direct punch with the other hand. She was overwhelmed with fear and thought the match was already over in Makimoto's favor, covering her face with her hands out of sheer anxiety. But surprisingly, at that very moment, Fuyo executed a sudden counterattack, landing a direct and incredibly powerful punch to Makimoto's face. Makimoto was utterly shocked, wondering in disbelief if he had really just been punched by that old man. He was in complete shock and started questioning in confusion how that old man could have possibly countered him. Moving quickly, Fuyo pressed his advantage, launching another direct punch. Makimoto quickly realized he was in danger and decided to execute a takedown and pin Fuyo to the ground to buy himself some time to recover. Makimoto did succeed in taking Fuyo down and thought he had finally regained control of the situation. But Fuyo swiftly took advantage of the moment and performed a sudden and powerful move that flipped Makimoto onto the ground. Dandelion was stunned by the unexpected turn of events, screaming in shock and disbelief. Fuyo then pinned Makimoto down forcefully, locking him in a front chokehold. Dandelion, still amazed, excitedly explained how Fuyo had read the takedown and immediately transitioned into a front choke during the fall. Makimoto looked completely stunned and felt totally trapped in the tight chokehold that Fuyo was executing with great precision. Makimoto started screaming in pain from the intense pressure. He questioned in utter confusion how an old man like Fuyo could possibly possess such strength and fighting expertise. Dandelion, still in a state of shock, explained how Fuyo had calmly and skillfully countered every one of his opponent's moves until he gained full control. Makimoto appeared completely defeated, lying on the ground under Fuyo's hold, despite being a professional fighter still in his prime. Dandelion couldn't hide her intense amazement at what she was witnessing, and called the scene insane. Yet, a wide smile appeared on her face. She looked absolutely thrilled and delighted by the situation. After a short struggle, Makimoto began to gradually lose consciousness due to the strength of the chokehold. At that moment, Dandelion quickly jumped toward Fuyo with a joyful smile, announcing the end of the match. Makimoto collapsed to the ground, completely unconscious. With great excitement and joy, Dandelion declared Fuyo the winner of the match after his opponent lost consciousness. And she began announcing his new nickname, the Fighting Uncle. The match result was officially recorded. The winner was the Fighting Uncle in his fight against Makimoto, and the match ended in just 21 seconds using a front chokehold. Somewhere else, an unknown figure sat watching the footage on their phone, commenting with clear nostalgia that the match brought back a lot of memories. The person continued watching, remarking with deep admiration that Fuyo was still in excellent physical shape despite all the time that had passed. The mysterious figure in the dark smiled and said that he had finally found this so-called Fuyo Sato. Immediately afterward, a powerful fighter appeared in an intense combat scene, delivering an incredibly strong punch, described as the hero's boomerang hook. The opponent collapsed instantly, unconscious from the blow. The referee announced the victory of the legendary fighter Yukito Oh, who had won 50 matches without a single loss, becoming the first Japanese WFC champion, and now declaring his retirement. The scene shifted to a press conference, where Yukito Oh was asked about the strongest opponent he had ever faced during his long, undefeated career. Yukito paused for a moment and began by saying that the WFC was full of incredibly strong fighters, monsters in terms of strength. Then he stopped and said that the strongest among them was someone very clearly defined in his mind. In another scene, a glass filled with a drink was slammed down on a restaurant table with excitement. Dandelion was sitting across from Fuyo, smiling brightly and congratulating him on his first win. Fuyo politely thanked her and said they could talk more later. Dandelion raised her glass cheerfully and suggested they drink now to celebrate his victory. But Fuyo quickly interrupted her seriously, saying he couldn't allow a minor to drink alcohol. Dandelion was shocked and confused by his comment. She smiled, trying to get him to reconsider, and asked him to be more understanding. But Fuyo, with a firm and serious tone, asked her directly to tell him honestly whether she was of legal age or not. He added that if she really was a high school student, then there was no way he'd let her drink. He kept repeating his question, insisting on a clear answer. Was she an adult or not? Dandelion became very angry and shouted back in frustration, asking if it was a problem for an adult woman to wear a school uniform. Fuyo, flustered, responded that he didn't say it was a problem. Later that evening, most of the customers had left the restaurant, and the table shared by Fuyo and Dandelion was still cluttered with leftover food. Dandelion smiled gently and handed Fuyo his prize money of 50,000 yen. But then she quickly laughed and told him she had taken half of it as her fee, since she was the producer. Dandelion enthusiastically explained that the Kenkao app relied on popularity and promotion just as much as physical strength. She then went on bragging, calling herself the genius producer Dandelion, which made Fuyo respond sarcastically, thanking her and telling her there was no need to go that far. At that moment, Fuyo looked hesitant and a bit sad as he stared down at the money in his hands. Dandelion noticed and asked if he wasn't happy with his share, but he denied it and said he was just feeling worried. Fuyo was deep in thought, telling himself that he had only won today by luck and wondering whether he'd be able to win again next time. He continued speaking with a mix of sadness and anxiety, saying he was worried because of his age. Dandelion couldn't hold back and burst into loud laughter after hearing him say that. Fuyo looked surprised by her laughter and asked, confused, why she was laughing so much. Dandelion apologized while trying to stop laughing and said what he said was just too funny. Then, with a gentler tone, she asked him whether he was really worried or just pretending, saying she might understand his feelings a little. Dandelion began recalling the events of the match, as she looked toward Fuyo, calmly telling him that he was smiling while fighting his opponent. She continued, pointing out that he genuinely enjoyed the fight, the act of overpowering his opponent and showing his strength. Then she suddenly leaned closer and playfully poked him with her finger, jokingly accusing him of being someone who just loves fighting. She leaned in even further and sarcastically called him a fight-obsessed maniac. Fuyo was surprised by her words and tried to defend himself awkwardly, explaining that he wasn't like that at all, and that all he wanted was to pay for his daughter's school fees. Dandelion smiled playfully and reassured him that she understood, but reminded him that 50,000 yen wouldn't be enough to cover tuition anyway. Still, she promised enthusiastically that she would work hard to promote him better and asked him to give it his all. Fuyo hesitated for a moment, then looked at Dandelion and asked her a serious question, wondering why she was helping him. She was quiet for a moment, a bit flustered as she prepared to answer. Then she told him seriously that she liked strong men. With a steady gaze, she added that the stronger a man was, the better it was for her. After a moment of silence, Dandelion suddenly asked Fuyo if he had married into his wife's family. Fuyo was caught off guard by the question, and awkwardly replied yes. Dandelion smiled and mentioned the name of his former fiancé, Tokiyuki, then continued, confirming that she knew his real name, Fuyo Sato. Fuyo looked shocked and asked her in confusion how she knew that, and Dandelion concluded that he must have changed his name, which explained why she hadn't recognized him before. Dandelion kept talking, pointing out the legendary champion Yuki Ue, who went undefeated across 50 matches and had only one draw on his record. Then she smiled and explained that the only person Yuki Ue ever drew against before retiring was Fuyo Sato, and asked him directly if that person was him. Fuyo didn't answer immediately and looked deeply uneasy, then muttered in a low voice that it was a very long time ago. Dandelion suddenly burst out with excitement and joy, declaring that she had been sure her guess was right. She expressed great admiration for Fuyo, praising him for having managed to draw against Yuki Ue, calling it an extraordinary achievement. She grabbed him suddenly in excitement and reassured him that there was absolutely nothing to worry about. She moved in close and told him with conviction that the mindset of a strong old man doesn't acknowledge defeat. Dandelion went on to say that, in the world of fighting, he could reach the top. Then she pointed at him firmly, saying with total confidence that she believed in him. After a moment of quiet and smiling, Dandelion told him calmly that she had already scheduled his next match. Fuyo was surprised at how quickly she had arranged the next fight, and asked in confusion when it would be. Dandelion replied that today's match was more of an official competition than just a test. Dandelion began explaining to Fuyo that the upcoming match would represent the true essence of the Kenkao app, where the fight would be real. The shock was clear on Fuyo's face upon hearing this, and Dandelion reaffirmed it while staring at him steadily, that this would be a completely real fight. She pointed to her phone, saying that in this kind of battle, there was no clear signal to indicate when it started. At that moment, a strange man appeared, leaping behind Fuyo while holding a glass cup, ready to strike him. Dandelion calmly explained that the fight had already begun. Fuyo suddenly remembered what she had told him earlier, how in this kind of real fight, there were no rules. However, she had also clarified that this didn't mean everything was allowed without limits. She explained that fighting in Kenkao is about determining who's strongest within a set of conditions and rules that are shaped by law, social status, and the fighter's surrounding environment. The strange man was still midair, about to strike Fuyo from behind with the glass. Fuyo realized the surprise attack too late and was unable to dodge the powerful blow. The hit landed with force, and Fuyo collapsed to the ground in pain from the sudden strike. The attacker laughed maniacally, proclaiming that he had won with obvious ease. Despite the intense pain and blood streaming down his face, Fuyo began to rise again. The attacker seemed a little surprised that Fuyo could still stand and mocked him, asking if he was still alive. As the blood continued to pour down Fuyo's face, the attacker looked at him with mockery, assuring him that this would be the end. Fuyo turned toward Dandelion, trying to understand what was happening, and whether this was even allowed in the first place. Dandelion, speaking with total indifference while she ate, told him coldly that this was Kenkao, the true kind of fighting. She further explained that this type of match never begins fairly and neatly with a start signal. Each confrontation is shaped by specific conditions. She went on to say that the previous match was a traditional one-on-one battle, a format he was used to. She added bluntly that this current match allowed for surprise attacks, and that using any object in the area as a weapon was also permitted. Tension and confusion spread across Fuyo's face as he repeated Dandelion's words, questioning the meaning of surprise attacks and weapons. At that moment, the attacker began approaching from behind, gripping a weapon in his hand. He launched a powerful strike with it toward Fuyo, who barely managed to dodge in time. The weapon crashed into a nearby glass object, making a loud, echoing sound, while Fuyo staggered backward, trying to regain his balance. The attacker laughed again, mockingly telling Fuyo not to exhaust himself too much, as long as he could still move. Fuyo was clearly worn out, struggling to rise again, while the attacker threatened to end it quickly and easily. At that point, Dandelion coolly announced that this man was Fuyo's current opponent. The attacker was shown grinning wickedly as he introduced himself as Smoker. Dandelion continued her introduction sarcastically, saying that, as he looked, he was short and weak, a fifth-tier fighter with no martial arts experience. It was clear to Fuyo that if this were just a standard martial arts match, he could have defeated Smoker easily in 10 seconds flat. But the truth was, he was in a highly dangerous situation because the conditions were entirely different from a normal fight. Dandelion continued seriously, affirming that Smoker was extremely powerful in this type of real combat. He had no hesitation in attacking people from behind with full force and easily crossed lines others wouldn't dare touch because of their conscience. That, precisely, was why Smoker was so formidable in Kenkao matches. Smoker sarcastically thanked her for the brief introduction, then turned to Fuyo and began speaking with open mockery, saying he'd tell him what he liked most in the world. Fuyo, looking exhausted, glanced at Smoker, who continued in a mocking tone, questioning if Fuyo had really been a professional MMA fighter. Smoker added with a sneer that Fuyo must have trained very hard in the past. While Smoker himself had been enjoying a careless life without any effort, he kept mocking Fuyo, saying that while Fuyo was constantly training and working hard, he was out there hurting innocent people for fun, without breaking a sweat. At that moment, Smoker launched a powerful attack using a chair, forcing Fuyo to raise his arms to defend himself with great difficulty. The chair shattered into pieces, and Fuyo backed away, trying to avoid further hits. Meanwhile, Dandelion watched the scene from a distance and quietly commented that this match might be too difficult for Fuyo. Then, suddenly, Smoker paused for a moment, and his expression changed noticeably. Fuyo stood there, smiling in a strange way, which angered Smoker, who demanded to know what he was laughing at. Fuyo smiled and sarcastically apologized for the unexpected grin he couldn't suppress. Smoker burst into a furious rage, threatening to kill Fuyo, unable to tolerate the mocking smile. But Fuyo calmly and confidently told him there was nothing to worry about. He began reminding Smoker of the match rules, which allowed for surprise attacks and the use of nearby items as weapons. When Smoker sharply asked what he was getting at, Fuyo calmly picked up a fork from the table. He raised the fork with a calm smile, as if trying to make a specific point to Smoker. Fuyo told Smoker coldly that if he stabbed him in the neck from behind with this fork, he wouldn't have a chance to survive. Smoker was stunned and confused by Fuyo's unexpected words. Fuyo continued, still smiling, explaining that if he did such a thing, Smoker wouldn't be able to fight afterward, and might actually die. Smoker grew more nervous and fearful, wondering if Fuyo would really resort to such a dangerous move. Fuyo smiled in a chilling way, and told Smoker he was a very nice guy for not using a lethal attack right from the start. At that moment, Smoker felt intense fear, while Dandelion's face lit up with a mix of shock and delight, completely surprised by Fuyo's sudden change in demeanor. Smoker could no longer control his anger and fear and screamed that he was going to kill Fuyo once and for all. But at that same moment, Fuyo calmly placed the fork back on the table and raised his fists, fully prepared to fight seriously and confidently. Fuyo and Smoker stood face to face, fully prepared to continue the fight. Their eyes were intensely focused, as each prepared for the next move. It was clear that Smoker was holding a weapon, a broken piece of a wooden chair. Dandelion, observing from a distance, noted that the person holding a weapon in a fight usually has the upper hand and greater advantage. Just then, Smoker launched a fierce attack, screaming as he charged, while Dandelion wondered aloud along with the viewers whether that idea was really true. Fuyo managed to dodge the strike with incredible speed and impressive agility. Dandelion watched in surprise and anticipation, beginning to analyze the situation. She quickly noticed that Smoker was using a broken piece of a chair and began identifying its weaknesses. The first flaw she noted was that the weapon had no proper handle for gripping securely. Because of this, Smoker couldn't hold it firmly, making his movements slow and ineffective. Thanks to this, it became much easier for Fuyo to evade Smoker's attacks with great ease. The second point Dandelion observed was that the material the weapon was made from was very light and not durable. For that reason, even if Fuyo were struck directly by it, the blow wouldn't be strong enough to cause serious damage. This meant that using such a weapon in battle was pointless unless it had far more impact than bare-handed force. Meanwhile, Smoker began to feel tired and exhausted from using the weapon, which confirmed Dandelion's third observation. A person who relies on a weapon tends to become overly dependent on it, making their movements predictable and easy to read. Taking all 3 points into account, it became clear to Fuyo how he should handle his opponent. Fuyo decided to take advantage of these insights and face Smoker's attacks head-on with full confidence. As a result, Smoker's movements became extremely predictable, allowing Fuyo to land a simple yet effective counterattack. Indeed, Fuyo landed a strong, direct punch to Smoker's face. Blood flew from Smoker's nose due to the force of the blow, and he collapsed to the ground in intense pain. He began screaming in visible agony, shouting that his nose had been broken by the punch. Fuyo then charged towards Smoker with a clear intent to continue his attack. But Dandelion immediately intervened, grabbing Fuyo and shouting loudly for him to stop. She then officially announced that Smoker had lost the will to continue fighting, and therefore, the match was over. Dandelion raised Fuyo's hand and proudly declared that the winner of the match was the fighting uncle. Fuyo looked surprised for a moment and asked in confusion if the match was really over that quickly. Dandelion laughed cheerfully and confirmed that the match was indeed over. His opponent was unconscious, and his nose was broken. Meanwhile, Smoker remained on the ground, breathing heavily after the brutal defeat he had just suffered. Dandelion looked at Fuyo and, with a smile, commented that while he seemed like a very kind man, his true self was honestly terrifying. After Dandelion announced the end of the match, Fuyo was startled when he noticed movement behind her, prompting him to quickly pull her aside. Suddenly and rapidly, Smoker appeared from behind them, charging forward in rage for another attack. This time, Smoker was holding a real, sharp knife in his hand. Dandelion and Fuyo were both shocked when they realized how dangerous the situation had become, with Dandelion yelling in confusion, asking him what exactly he was trying to do. Smoker looked extremely furious and seemed fully intent on harming his opponent as he approached them with steady steps and a terrifying expression. Dandelion shouted, trying to warn Smoker that using a real weapon in the match was completely against the rules. But Smoker ignored her warning and yelled back angrily for her to shut up, declaring that he no longer cared about the rules of the Kenkao app. Dandelion realized that Smoker had completely lost his mind and decided to take another approach, telling him seriously that if he continued acting this way, she would escalate the matter to the national authorities and report him. She immediately began trying to contact someone to report him quickly. At that moment, Fuyo stepped in calmly and confidently, asking Dandelion to move back so he could protect her. Fuyo looked at Smoker with seriousness and unwavering determination, then told Dandelion that he would handle it himself and stop Smoker. Dandelion was shocked and deeply worried, warning Fuyo that he would surely die if he tried to confront Smoker while he was armed with a knife. Smoker continued to point the knife at Fuyo, threatening him, while Dandelion watched in extreme concern, asking what Fuyo intended to do against someone carrying a real blade.